So thank you so much for joining us today on 3.14 or Pi Day to kick off our celebration for Pi Week in honor of the mathematical constant pi and delicious baked goods. So during the week, we're going to have additional events as well as a pie poetry contest and a pie-related scavenger hunt. Participation in any Pi Week activity will earn you entry points toward our Pi Week grand prize, which is 3 months in a Pie of the Month club. Or if you are not a Pie of the Month club person, a gift card of equal value to a bakery or pizza place of your choice. So to earn your points, make sure you sign into today's event. I will share the sign-in form shortly. And check out the entire Pi Week website for more ways to participate. So on to our main event. We're so excited to be joined today by Susan Semenak from her beautiful kitchen in Canada. Susan of Champlain Abroad is a Montreal journalist, food writer, and teacher. She's an award-winning cookbook author, and her writing and food styling have also appeared in the Toronto Star, Organic Gardening Magazine, Montreal and Toronto Home magazines, and on CTV television. Today, she's going to be talking us through her easy apple pie with crumble topping. And as I said, if you have any questions throughout, you are welcome to unmute and ask, or you can type it into the chat and I will read it for you. Thank you so much, Susan.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's nice to see you all. So I said it's my pleasure, but the truth is that when Beth first sent me an email asking me to do a pie demonstration, I got major anxiety attacks. So, you know, here I am, I'm a food writer, I've written 2 cookbooks, I know my way around the kitchen, but my dirty little secret is that I am terrified of pie crust, terrified. So I wrote back to Beth and said, look, probably thanks so much for asking me, but maybe you should find somebody else, because really all I ever do is look for ways to cheat and fool the system. And she said, well, maybe you're not alone. Maybe your shortcuts and secrets will be of some relief to others. So here I am. So it's true, I have pie crust anxiety disorder. And the reason I have this is because all the times I try pie crust, and pie crust seems to be the worst of it. Like, I'm okay with cakes and cookies, but there's something about crust. I'm never guaranteed what's going to happen. So, you know, if I follow many different recipes, really good recipes, you know, King Arthur flour or the New York Times or Julia Child, and maybe sometimes it works, and then I'll do exactly the same thing and nothing works. You know, the dough is crumbly and I cannot make it hold together, or things are so kind of wet and soggy and greasy and they stick to the board and there is no way to roll, or if you roll, there's no way to get it from the board to the pie dish. So in all of that anxiety, but I do love pie. Like, everyone loves pie. You gotta have pie. And, you know, I could, of course, buy the ready-made pie crust. And I guess I'm here to say that that would be okay too. And if you were gonna, that's like the bottom. So if you're gonna buy a ready-made pie crust, I mean, I think you really wanna be looking at the ingredient list. Sometimes bakers sell their pie crust pre-made and frozen. So that's pretty good, because, you know, there's really good ingredients in there. All butter's really good. You really want to watch for the ones that have all kinds of preservatives. So that's the biggest cop-out, but it's okay too. The next step up from that is puff pastry. And so frozen puff pastry is actually really, really good. Very few people, Beth has managed to achieve a puff pastry, but very few people make their own puff pastry. It is a really complicated process, but there are many really good store-bought puff pastries, all butter puff pastries in the freezer section. And that can make a really good looking galette, you know, like a rustic tart. So I'll often make especially when, you know, berries are in season, I'll often make a rustic pie by using a thawed, previously frozen sheet of puff pastry. All you do is roll it out a little if it's not rolled. Many of them already are. And then you really need high heat, and then you just fold over the edges. So that's the second rung. Then the third, as you work your way up the pie hierarchy, I have learned to make cookie, what do you call it? Cookie crumb crusts. And crumb crusts are actually really good. And in fact, once you're in crumb crust territory, you're not even cheating anymore, but they're really, really easy. So some of my favorites are, well, there's the classic, the graham cracker crust. Another one of my favorites is a ginger snap crust. So you buy ready-made ginger snaps and crush them. Well, there's also the Oreo cookie crust. I once tried a recipe where you took the whole darn Oreo cookie, cream and all, and smashed it up, or you just use those little black wafers. So you get a chocolate crust. Those are really, really good. I actually quite like those because they're sweet crusts and they have a little bit of crispiness. And so the ratio for those are really, really simple. So for example, a ginger snap crust, for 2 cups of ground ginger snaps, you do 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter, melted. And you just, you mix them together with a fork until the crumbs are really well moistened. The way to crumble up those ginger snaps is in the food processor. And if you don't have a food processor, I think a Ziploc plastic bag works really well with anything really. The end of a wooden spoon or a rolling pin's really good. So you could smash that up. Let's see, what was I going to say? So if you were going to make a chocolate wafer crust, say 1 2/3 cup chocolate cookie crumbs and 4 ounces of unsalted butter melted, and maybe a little pinch of salt, and you just fold it with like a rubber spatula until it all comes moist, and then you put it in your pan. It could be like a square pan, or if you're making a pie, in the pie, and you want to really press well to compact it. If you don't compact it well enough, I've learned the hard way, it just stays crumbly. You don't really make a shell. But if you really pack it down, you can get it nice and stiff. So I just pound it all in with a glass or a measuring cup, or the heel of my hand. And then you bake it in a 350-degree oven for, say, 10 to 12 minutes. So you want it to be a little bit crispy and kind of golden, which you can't see with the chocolate. So the chocolate, you're looking for the crispiness. So 10 to 12 minutes in a 350-degree oven, and then you cool it completely before filling. So that's the next level of pie crust. And then after that is the one I'm going to show you today, and that's the press-in pie crust. So I have in the past made press-in pie crusts with things like simple sugar cookie recipes. The Wilton, is Wilton the cake decorating company? I once found, they make cookie cutters and things. I once found on the side of a package a really simple sugar cookie recipe, which is really great for working with children because it's simple, it doesn't stick too much, it handles easily. And as it turns out, that cookie crust makes a really interesting pie crust too. But it's not quite a pie, it's more of a tart because it's very sweet. And the trouble with that sometimes, those kind of cookie crusts, is that they get too thick. And you really want the ratio, like the ratio of filling and crust has to be just right in a pie. Like, and if there's, while I was practicing for this, my first cheat was to do a cookie crust. And in fact, it was a major dud because there was just way too much cookie crust and not enough filling. So I abandoned that. But then I found this other recipe. It's an old family recipe of somebody I know whose grandmother has been doing it. And it's a kind of a traditional pie crust, but it's press in. And I guess because of all my past trauma with the rolling and transferring, there's something about being able to press that crust in that's just, it's like foolproof. You know, all I need is the heel of my hand and I'm good to go. So that's what I'm going to show you today. But I thought before we start, you know, maybe after you do this, you'll be empowered to move towards a rollout crust. So I thought, as I was actually, so in the interim, I made this pie, and then I tried a recipe of Julia Child's, and it's cooling in the fridge now. I have no idea how it's going to go, and maybe if I'm feeling really bold by the end of this class, maybe I'll take it out of the fridge and try to roll it. I figure since I've told you I have no idea whether it'll work, you won't judge me if it all falls apart again. But maybe the hex has been broken. I don't know. So a few of the tricks that people say work for making pie dough is, well, the really important thing is to keep things cold. And I think my tendency is to use my hands too much. And some people actually have colder hands than others. And I guess my hands are hot. That's the story, and I'm sticking with it. So the key with pie crust is not to handle it too much, and to use your hands as little as possible. So one of the things that's recommended for kind of moving the dough from the bowl or the board is to handle it with a bench scraper, you know, like I guess it's a dough scraper. So that you're not, there's no heat. The other thing is don't overwork it. I think my tendency is also to try to mix things to get them homogeneous. And you don't really want that with pie dough. You want some lumpiness, and in the overworking, you're getting things kind of soggy, and you're getting things a bit too fine, and you're also, yet again, heating it up. So don't overwork things. The other thing is when deciding on a recipe, because that's the first thing you need to do, it seems, from my research, it seems that the recipes that have lots of butter, more butter, are easier to handle. So apparently if they're shortening, it'll be flakier, and a flaky pie is, of course, nirvana. But if you're a beginner, the butter really seems to work. I guess because it prevents the kind of dryness that makes things tough. Practice. Maybe part of my problem is that I get so defeated, I run away from the pie. But the more you try, the more you get a sense of what works. You know, you get a little bit of confidence, or you're not afraid to experiment. Like, you know, like if it seems a bit dry, add a tablespoon extra water, and you kind of come and go slowly. So practice and try. Add water as you go. So one of the big mistakes that I think I have made is I've been too quick to add the liquid. You know, it seems to dry, it's not coming together as a ball, and I dump in too much water. So really, gradual is everything. Chill, chill. So don't be afraid to stop everything. Like if it's on the board and it's sticking and it's just not going, just gather it all up and put it gather it up, cover it in plastic, and put it in the fridge for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then go again. So that's an important thing I've learned. Also that I think I said this already. So the dough shouldn't be too fine. I use a food processor because that's the easiest, but I guess it's my tendency to over process it. So I make it too fine. Really, you want it to be the consistency kind of, it can be irregular, and it should be the consistency between breadcrumbs and small peas, and like different sizes in there. let's see, what else? Oh, in terms of keeping things cold, one of the things, well, I use my rolling pin, but a friend of mine told me that what she does is she gets a wine bottle or a glass soft drink bottle and she keeps it in the fridge or the freezer, and then she flours it and rolls with it. So it's keeping things cold. So I thought that was a pretty neat idea too. Okay, so those are all the little tricks. Oh, also for if you're making a pie in a pie plate like we're doing today, you don't really have to worry about sticking it all. So there's no need to butter the dish. But if you're making like a galette, a free-form pie on a baking sheet, like if you were using the puff pastry, for example, or even a simple crust, you really want to line the sheet. You want to guarantee that when those juices get sticky and syrupy, that they don't stick to the pan and then you can't get your pie off the pan. So your best friend is a sheet of parchment paper. So parchment paper, I think, is really important under a free-form pie. And the reason the free-form pie is really good, I think, is because you'll notice that in none of these examples I've given you have I talked about like a real two-crust pie. Because a two-crust pie is, well, maybe that's next year's pie. Maybe after a whole year of pie adventure, I could talk to you about a two-crust pie. Mostly I'm talking about one-crust pies. So the one-crust pie, you can hide some of your problems or defects. It's okay if it cracks. You can pinch it together or press it together in a way you can't with the top pie. So it's okay if that bottom crust, cracks. And the nice thing about the rustic pie, I think, is that it doesn't matter if it's round. In fact, it's more beautiful if it's rough around the edges, slightly amorphous, not quite circular. You just gather it up, pinch it a little, and it really doesn't matter. So, okay, let me start. You see, I'm avoiding even the press-in. I have to tell you, I'm talking to you now, and I'm going to give you the simplest pie crust ever. I just made it 3 days ago, and it worked perfectly. But I'm sitting here now saying, this whole thing might not work at all. But anyway, let's do it. So I have my Cuisinart. If you don't have a food processor, a big shallow bowl with, a fork or a pastry blender. Do you call it a pastry blender, pastry cutter? Anyway, one of these, that'll work fine too. But I guess I like the food processor because you're working fast and quick and a few motions, so no overworking. Okay, so first I have, I think you all have the recipe, right, Beth?
Yes, the recipe is on the Pie Week website. And I also just want to say, you're getting a lot of support in your intimidation factor in the chat.
Good.
We all feel you. We've all had one that's gone wrong. You said that I made a puff pastry, which I sort of did, but it was completely accidental. And I've also had a two-crust pie where I could only say that the top crust ended up with a slump where it sort of sagged off one side of the pie, and I don't entirely understand how it happened, but it still tasted good, and that's the point, right? It doesn't have to be perfect to taste good.
Exactly. Does anybody else have like pie disaster or pie anxiety stories they want to share? This is like this could be like group therapy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've just never really made pies because I don't consider myself much of a baker, but I'm trying to change that. So I've made like a galette before, savory or sweet, but I've never done a two-crust pie. So I like your idea of building our courage for next year.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm happy you brought up the savory pie because we don't talk enough about savory pies, but they're really, really beautiful. And they're really neat with prepared puff pastry, you know, like roasted butternut squash and, you know, mushrooms, sweet potatoes. And so you just pile them in there with, you know, maybe 2 eggs and half a cup of, you know, cream and some shredded cheese, and you pile it in and then fold it all over. That's a really beautiful dinner. So yeah, savory pie doesn't get enough attention, I think. Okay, so on to the press-in crust. So I just put a cup of flour into the food processor, and I'm adding half a teaspoon of salt.
Susan, I have a question.
Sure.
So I don't have a food processor, but I have a Vitamix. Would you suggest I use the Vitamix or that I'd use the bowl?
I'd say the bowl, because no, the Vitamix would be okay, but you got to be we were just talking about how powerful that Vitamix is. So use the Vitamix, but really keep it short because it's moving fast. I think you'd be okay with the Vitamix.
Okay.
Yeah, with caution, because the Vitamix can make hot soup. Like you can put cold ingredients in and end up with hot soup. So if you're following the rules of keeping things cool, you need to go really quick with the Vitamix and don't let the butter melt.
Yeah, maybe go with the bowl.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure if you're going to have trouble getting that out. You know, if you put a little too much water in, you're going to have a hard time getting it out of the bottom of that blender. Anyway, you're doing the brave thing. You're doing it by hand. Okay, so I have the flour and a little salt, and I'm just going to pulse once or twice to mix it all up. And now I took my butter, 1 stick of butter out of the fridge. I took it out a few minutes ago, and I probably should have left it. But so anyway, now I'll have an excuse if it doesn't work. I'm taking the stick of butter and I'm cutting it into pieces, big chunks. Doesn't have to be so small. Okay, so I've cut that in there, and now I'm going to pulse really briefly, like not much. I just want to get it to like a coarse mixture, maybe 10 to 12 pulses. I stopped at 10. Let me take a look. Yeah, I'm going to go another 2 because a few of the pieces are too chunky. Okay, so I think that's good. I don't know if you could see this. Can you see? It's quite irregular. I don't, you know, it's bigger than some are, you know, like peanuts, not peanuts size. What do you say? Like a corn kernel, slightly bigger than a corn kernel. So, okay. Now I'm going to add the water. You'll see that I have a little jar of water here, and I put ice in it because I really want that water to be cold. But here's the trick. It is impossible. Like, there's no way that all of us here making pie are going to use the same amount of water. And it depends on how warm you keep your house, you know, the humidity levels in your house, how old the flour is, how the flour was milled, what kind of wheat was used. So there are really big variations in how much water is required. So I always start with 1 tablespoon. I'm almost positive that's not going to be enough. So I'm going to get this going, but I also don't want to keep pulsing too much. So I'm going to put it through the feeder and then just pulse briefly. And then I'm going to look. Because once I've gotten too wet, then I have to, I've kind of messed things up. No, I think I need another, maybe 1 or 2.
Susan, can you say what exactly, like, how are you making that judgment?
I'll tell you in a sec, hold on. Yeah, how I make that, how do I know it's too dry? Because when I put my fingers in here, can I make it come together? Because don't forget, when I get this glop of stuff into my pie dish, I really want it to stick to the edges and the bottom. See, so I'm thinking I need one more tablespoon of water. See, when I look, I take up a handful of it, and it, well, see, it's starting to hold its shape. See, I'm not positive if I should put any more water or not. Does anyone remember how much did I put? I think I put 3. Did I put 3?
I think you've done 3.
Yeah. So should I put any more? No, I'm going to stop. No, I'm putting one more. I've seen recipes that go with, for this much flour and butter, I've seen recipes that go to up to a 1/3 cup of water, which seems like a lot to me, but I'm going to go for one more and hope for the best. Okay. Yeah, it's better. So look, you see, it's holding its shape now. So I don't want to handle it too much. So all I'm going to do now, let me just clear some of my clutter. So I use, I think this is a 9-inch, like a standard pie plate. And I really like the glass one. And the only reason I like the glass one is because when it's in the oven baking, I have no way of knowing whether that pie crust is ready, except I could see through it. So I'm looking for golden. I want it to be nice and dark gold so that it's not going to be soggy. So I like a glass. So now I'm just taking the whole contents of my food processor and I'm dumping it here. There's some stuck at the bottom, so I'm going to take that out.
Susan, real quick question. So my pie pan is ceramic. So is it, I don't need to butter it or line it?
No, there's so much butter in the crust, you're going to be fine. Good question though. Okay, so here it is. I got a pile of, clumpy business in the bottom of my pie crust. So now I'm going to use my fingers to first press it on, and it's just right actually. Well, so far so good, I should say. I hope I didn't jinx myself. Okay, so now I'm using my fingers I press the bottom first, and then I really like the heel of my hand. Do you call this the heel? You know this part down here. And so now I'm really pressing because I want to make the dough come up the sides. Here, I want you to see this. Can you see? The other thing that's really handy here is to use, I don't know, the side of a measuring cup or a glass. Actually, this little bowl is going to be kind of handy. So I'm now pressing on the sides to create the walls, the side crust. I think it's better to start with your fingers and then go to a different, another thing like a glass or a bowl, because once again, we're not doing too much heat, Okay, it's starting to stick, so I'm going to go back to my. So the last time I made this, I had a little panic attack at this point because it all looked kind of shaggy and loose. I said, this isn't going to work. And in fact, it was fine. So now I've got the sides, but I got a kind of a bit of a floury mess up here at the top. So now with my thumb, I'm going to press the rim down to give myself a little rim. You know, if you had rolled it out, you would have like a circle and then you would just cut it to size, but we don't have that luxury with the press in. So you just create the rim. And if you don't have enough to create a rim, you just keep pushing with your finger up the sides to move it up to the top. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
So about how thick would you say that the crust should be when you're pushing it into the pan?
Let me get my little, it should be about, I don't know, about 1/8 of an inch. 1 inch quarter. Yeah, about 1/8 of an inch. You know,
Perfect.
I don't even worry about that. Like if it's a little thicker, that's fine. If it's a little thinner, you don't want your dough to be too thin though, because you want it to be sturdy enough to hold the filling as it bakes. You know, that filling is going to get juicy. So if it's too thin, I'm always afraid that things get soggy and then come through. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, in order for it to look, it gets a bit messy here. Here, I'm going to add, so where you have some extras, you could do a little patchwork. So
I do have a quick question. I don't know.
Yes.
Sorry. I don't know if I just have a very deep pie pan, but I can't get mine to go up to the top.
Maybe your pie pan's too deep.
It's already getting pretty,
Yeah,
it's already getting pretty thin.
Okay, but you know what? You're okay. So just leave it as it is. Actually, that looks really beautiful. Yeah, it doesn't matter if
Oh, thank you.
It totally doesn't matter for it to go all the way up. That looks really nice. Okay, so now
I have a question too, Susan. So I'm doing it by hand, so I'm a little behind, but when you're at the point where you're going to put the dough into the pie pan, should it be cohesive at all, or is it really just going to be crumbles? Do I need to add more water?
When you pinch it between like 3 or 4 fingers, will it come together?
Yeah.
It does?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Show me. Oh yeah, it looks good. No, I think you're gonna be, yeah. No, it looks really good. Yeah, awesome. You're good.
Thank you.
Okay, so now, because I want it to look slightly nicer than it does now, I'm gonna do a little pinching. So I put one finger here and then I pinch the dough to give that little, you know, the little fanciness in a crust. Like often a simple pie crust will have the pattern of the tines of a fork. That doesn't really work here because things are a little more crumbly. So I like to do a little pinching pattern. So I hold the side like this, and then I pinch. You know what? I'm going to turn my camera down so you can see this better. So I go like this, and I pinch to make like, oh yeah, it's looking really good. I have these little ridges in between my forefinger and my thumb where I've squeezed. And you know, if it sticks to your fingers, it's okay. You just patch it back up.
It is a really pretty flexible crust, which seems great, because if you have an issue when you need to patch with a rolled out crust, it just does not work that well necessarily.
No, it's really bad. This one, you can really, and even if it's not looking good now, you know, it looks okay, but still a little crumbly. Once it gets in the oven and things kind of, you know, melt together, it's really going to be okay. So here's my shaggy little crust. So there, that's that. Can you see the little pinching business here?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, as you can see, I've made a really big mess here, but I'm just, you know, this is part of my therapy. Okay, so that's the crust. Now if I were starting here, I'll move this up again. So if I were like starting now, I got a little bit prepared before we joined each other, just to be kind of organized. But if I were going to start slicing apples now, I would take this pie crust and put it in the fridge, just to keep.
We seem to have lost Susan briefly. Hopefully she'll be joining us again in a second.
That was weird.
Yeah, I think she must have lost her Wi-Fi.
Yeah, of course.
So how's everyone's pie going?
I'm just watching. I don't do cooking and watching at the same time, but I'm absorbing.
I think mine's okay, but I just bought this gorgeous pie pan yesterday, but it's very deep, and I noticed that when I bought it. So mine is definitely not up there, but I'm thinking I could just like additionally like 1/3 more the recipe if I wanted to use that pan again, because I do like having it, you know, at the top with the ridge.
Yeah, the Emile Henry are really deep.
They're deep, yeah, but beautiful.
But beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Very, very.
Mine definitely looks like a kid, like maybe a 4-year-old made it, but
It's rustic. It's rustic.
it's very rustic.
Go with that. Oh, here she is.
Welcome back, Susan. You are muted and we cannot see you right now.
Okay, now.
Yep, welcome back.
Sorry,
We were just chatting about how everyone's pie is going. And Emily was talking, so she bought a beautiful kind of deep dish pie plate, and she was talking about maybe increasing the recipe by like 1/3 or something so that it would go all the way to the top next time.
Yeah, maybe 1.5 even. Yeah. Okay, so now we're at the filling. So apple just seems to be the easiest and, well, kind of the old classic. But the other good thing about apples for a beginner pie is that they don't get too juicy. You know, the trouble with many fruits is they really let off a lot of juice, like cherries, for example, or strawberries. And then you get the mess of the bottom crust getting soggy. So I think apples are good. So I sliced up, let me see, 4 apples peeled and sliced. The thing about apples is it's up to you to decide what kind to use. If you like a pie filling that's kind of mushier and apple saucier, then Macintosh apples are for you. If you like it that the apple pieces hold their shape within the pie, then maybe you want Cortland or Spartan or Empire, but it doesn't really matter. So I sliced up the 4 large apples, and now I'm adding, well, I gave you a recipe for 1/2 cup, and I found that a little bit sweet. Maybe my apples were sweeter than they'd been the last time. So I'd say that you should put anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 cup of sugar to taste. I wouldn't put too much less because the sugar is not just about sweetening, but it also creates a kind of syrupiness that you really want in the pie. So here's the sugar. And then of course the essential ingredient of all apple pies is the cinnamon. So a teaspoon of cinnamon. If you like cinnamon less, use less. I wouldn't use more because it could be pretty intense. If you like cloves or nutmeg or allspice, those would be beautiful too. So now I'm just mixing this all up. Oh, the thing I did, because I got my apples ready in advance, I added the lemon juice to them before because that prevented them from discoloring. So if you were just doing it now on the spot, add your lemon juice. 1 teaspoon.
Susan, do you find that the lemon juice adds to the flavor, or is it just an aesthetic thing for the apples to remain like a pretty color?
I think it adds to the flavor too. It gives it a slight bit of a little tart sourness that is a kind of a, you know, a counterbalance to the sweetness. So here's the apples. I'm going to just pile them into the crust, into the middle of the crust. Really, because, you know, we don't have a top crust and there's no problem with slumping and other things. Like, you know, if you don't have enough apples, so you'll have a slightly less appley pie. I mean, you want it to come slightly higher than the edge of the pie. And you'll see if you do it in advance that some of the juices become syrupy with the sugar and the cinnamon. So you want to be sure to get that in there too. So that's the filling. And then the crumble topping. I really love crumble toppings. I guess because I really like apple crisp. And so, you know, like a French apple pie, I don't know why they call it French. The Dutch do this too. I like it that it combines the crust and the crumble. Like I can have my, you know, pie and my crisp all in one. So in a separate bowl, I'm going to mix half a cup, 1 stick of butter. And this time the butter's at room temperature because I want it to blend easily. So I cut it up into chunks. So here's my 1 stick of butter. And then I have half a cup of brown sugar. The brown sugar is nice here because it adds an extra depth of flavor. You know, there's molasses in the making of brown sugar. So it just has a nice color and really a nice flavor. You know, if you didn't have brown sugar, it would be okay to use sugar. Okay, so we have the butter and the brown sugar and half a cup of flour. And again, cinnamon, but this time only half a teaspoon of cinnamon. At this point, people do all kinds of fun things with crumble. And really, if you want to just get your old apple crisp crumble and transfer it here, that's fine. So it might have some oatmeal in there. So maybe you'd put, maybe you do, you know, half a quarter cup of flour, a quarter cup of oatmeal. Maybe you want to put some nuts in there. I think ground almonds could be really nice. I don't like it when they're too chunky. So I would really want them to be quite finely chopped or almost ground actually. So they could go in there too. What else would you put in a crumble? I guess that's about it. Anyway, so
sorry, Susan, since you mentioned the ginger snap crust, now I'm just thinking about ginger and apples. And so if it were me, I would put in like little diced up crystallized ginger.
Oh yeah. Wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah, that would be really good. I love crystallized ginger. Okay, so now I'm just using a fork here. You could use that pastry cutter, but a fork is fine too. And I'm just mashing it all up until I get it crumbly and kind of you know, consistent. I don't want the chunks to be too big. I'm going to want some chunks. Mostly it's the butter. I want the butter to break down. You know, we could have used in that apple, could have put some maple syrup. Maple would have been really nice. If you have maple syrup, maple sugar, you know, Vermonters and Quebecers, we love our maple. So that would have been nice.
It is maple season too.
Oh, yeah. Yay. You know, in the city, you don't really understand that so much, but it's just the idea of that feels so hopeful.
Yeah, I think they just started tapping around here in the past week or so.
Yeah, and especially when they use the old buckets, we don't see them so much anymore, but they can make your heart skip a beat. The other thing I do sometimes when I'm making either an apple crisp or an apple pie, just for a little fanciness, is I'll add a little liqueur, like a little Calvados or Cointreau. And so when it gets syrupy, there's just a little added flavor. That's kind of nice too. Okay, so I think I'm finished with it's quite chunky, and I want it to be chunky because I like it that when it bakes, I'm gonna have not just a kind of floury top, but a good crumble. So can you see it's like it's quite crumbly, quite thick. So I'm just gonna distribute this on top of my pie. The last time I made this, I didn't have enough butter, so I only made half the portion, and it was okay. So it's getting pretty high, but when it all starts to, when it bakes and starts to melt, it's gonna come down, and the apples too will come down in size. So it looks like a big tall pie now, but it isn't really. Can you see it?
Nope, it's just out of shot. Oh yeah, that looks delicious.
So, there it is. So I'm going to, you really want to remember this. If I hadn't remembered this, you would curse me for a good long time. You want to put this on a baking sheet because it's going to get, it's going to get drippy. So I'm going to get a baking sheet and I'm going to put it on there. The other thing we should have done is preheat the oven. So a preheated oven for 375. So if you haven't preheated your oven, I would just put the pie as it is now in the fridge for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes and get that oven good and hot, because you really want that crust to kind of to form a layer, a little bit of crispy layer on the bottom before those apples start to get really juicy. So that kind of forms a barrier. So if you haven't preheated the oven, just put the pie in the fridge and wait. Just scatter it so everything's covered. Okay, so it's at 375. Let me make a little order here. So we won't wait. That should take about, depend. All our ovens are different, so that should take about 45 to 50 minutes. Maybe it might even go to 55. But what you're looking for, and that's why that glass bottom is real salvation. If you're not a pie expert, you just hold it up with your oven mitts and you can see whether it's good and golden brown. And if you're not sure, put it in a little longer. You want to err on the side of more golden than less golden. So that's it, the foolproof pie. Good with ice cream, I guess. I guess there's time. Should I try the galette dough that's in the fridge?
We're here as your support group. You can do it.
Okay. Well, maybe you're my support group, or maybe you're going to be. Okay, let me try. So
I have an important question for you, Susan. I don't know if you've had apple pie in Vermont before, but here you tend to eat it with a side of cheddar cheese, to the point where even I've seen crusts with cheddar in the crust itself. So how do you feel about cheddar and apple pie?
Listen, I love Vermont, and I never want to say anything against anything Vermontish, but it's not for me. Like, I think I'm a little narrow-minded when it comes to apple pie. So I don't like cloves in my apple pie, and I don't want, I have to say though, I've never tried it. So, that's kind of closed-minded. Maybe I'll try when I get to Vermont. Like if I had some Shelburne Farms cheddar, maybe that would like change everything. So
I'm sure
when
it
you
would.
but is it just as sweet with, you know what? The saltiness of the cheese is probably quite interesting with the sweet of the pie.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of it. And I think it's also maybe like, apple pie can be sweet. So if you have the cheese as like a palate cleanser, you can keep eating more. More
Oh,
apple
God.
pie.
Yeah, so maybe I don't need to know about that.
I don't
Okay,
actually
so-
know what the origin of that habit
I
is
think
at
it-
all.
I think it's British. Maybe the British brought it over. I feel like I've heard that somewhere. And you see, like in Montreal, we are more influenced by the French traditions. So, you know, our pie crusts will often be, well, it'll be more of a tart than a pie. So it's a little sweeter. And often you'll find it in a, you know, like a tart in a fluted edge. That's another thing that's quite good for a beginner too, is those, you know, the pie plates with the removable bottoms. Those are really great too. So, you know, although a pie crust doesn't matter. That's the other reason I love pie, is because you don't have to get it out of a form and, you know, wonder if it's going to break at the last minute. You serve that pie straight from the plate. So less chance of failure even right up to the last minute. So now when I'm going to try to roll out that galette, so I found a recipe. I shared it with Beth, and it's a Julia Child recipe for a galette dough, but it's interesting because she uses sour cream. Wait, let me get my papers here. And you know what, if you want to find it, it's easy to find online. It's called, if you Google Julia's galette dough, she makes a raspberry galette, and I think it appeared in the Times-Picayune in New Orleans. So I followed this recipe.
I just popped it into the chat for everyone if they want
great,
that.
thank you. So that one recipe made 2 little discs of pie crust. So I'll keep one of them. Which one do you think is the luckier one? I'm gonna go with this one.
Right hand.
Pardon? Did
I said
choose
right
that?
hand, and you chose it. So
You chose the correct one.
I don't know.
Well, we don't know that yet. So here it is. First, let me get ready. So to get ready, I'll have my baking sheet and my parchment paper. You'll notice I haven't even started to talk about filling for this one because I don't know if there'll be anything to fill. Okay, so I brought my marble board out because the marbles actually, you know, as bakers will tell you, marble's really great because it keeps cool. So it's a really good surface for making pastry and crust. So I'm gonna flour it. And I have my rolling pin. I'm flouring this too. And now, so I made this actually several days ago, 2 days ago, I guess, and I kept it in the fridge. You needed to refrigerate it at least 2 hours. Maybe I should have taken it out of the fridge just maybe 10 minutes ago, just so that it's not too hard. Could be that it's too hard. Okay. So now I'm gonna roll and see. They say this is foolproof. Let's see if this fool can do it. So what they say, oh, the other thing that the writer recommends is that you lift it often in order to flour underneath to keep it from sticking. And start in the middle and slowly go to the edges, and yeah, keep turning. And it's a galette, so we don't care whether it's round or not. As I'm looking at it, I could see that where I did do a good job is I could see the big chunks of butter still in the dough. So that's really good. I didn't overwork it. This is going to be a really small galette because, you know, we got 2 out of it. Okay.
Susan, are you rolling it into a circle?
Circle-ish.
Circle-ish. I was wondering
Yeah.
if you have any tips for rolling things into circles, because while I haven't made much pine crust, I've made like flatbreads or tortillas and things, and I never can get them circular. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna share a piece of wisdom with you that I learned from Melissa Clark, the food writer at the New York Times. It's the most brilliant advice you'll get about making a circle. Don't even try. Who cares?
I wondered if that was going to be it.
She says that about pizza, about galette dough. She said, let it go, be free. It's amorphous. Who cares? You know what? That so liberated me when she said that. It changed my life. So now I don't care.
It's going to taste good whether it's circular or not.
Exactly. And you know, a rustic pie, you just have to decide who you are. I'm a rustic kind of person. So, you know, this fits my personality really well. I mean, the only thing you do, okay, joking aside, the way to get it rounder is to keep moving it and to work from the inside out. And so as you see, if it's getting too long, you too long in one direction, you just start rolling in the other direction. And oh yeah, the one thing you really do want to care about is that you have uniform thickness. And you know, if you haven't rolled enough on the edges, it's going to be your dough when you fold it over is going to get too thick, and then it doesn't bake uniformly. So you want to make sure that those edges are actually getting thinned out enough. So you'll see mine is not nearly round, and I don't care. Okay, so far so good. But then the question will be, oh, while I was talking, I forgot to check for sticking. No, after a while, the sticking doesn't matter so much. Maybe it's good I'm talking, so I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. So I'm having more luck. Oh my God.
Distraction is the key for the perfect galette crust, maybe.
Pardon?
I said distraction is key for the perfect galette crust, maybe.
I guess it is. It's actually really good for a lot of things. Like I do mosaics. I'm also an artist. And if I try to create something, it never works. But, you know, if I listen to a podcast or get absorbed in a conversation, things kind of create themselves. So it's the other side of your brain that begins to do interesting things. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop while the going is good. Okay, so look, can you see it?
That looks good.
Not bad, but now I got to get it from here to here. So one of the techniques people say to do, I don't know if I should do it, is to roll the dough up around your rolling pin. See, look. Oh my God. If this works, this is going to be like momentous. So I rolled it onto the rolling pin, and now I'm going to unroll it onto my parchment paper. Oh my God, you just witnessed a historic moment. Look. See, doesn't matter. Thank you, thank you. So I don't know if we have time. I thought, because I didn't get ready for this moment, I was sure it wouldn't happen. I think what would be really fun here is pear and chocolate. Pear and chocolate. Pear and ginger would be really good too, if I had crystallized ginger. So I bought these really quite beautiful, I guess, are they Bosc pears? Yeah, Bosc pears. And they're pretty ripe. So I think what I'm gonna do though, because pears are, hold on a sec. Sorry for the clatter. Pears are way juicier than apples. So I'm going to add a tablespoon or two of cornstarch. So I'm gonna, here, let me do this. So I'm gonna slice up my pears, and they're riper than I expected. So I'm worried that it's gonna be too juicy and gloppy. So I'm slicing up the pears, and then I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and the pears are really sweet, so only a 1/4 cup brown sugar.
And how much filling will you be aiming for here? Like, because the
Oh,
galette is
that's-
flat, it doesn't have something to hold it.
Yeah. So I'm going to want to leave about 2 inches around the edges so I could bring the folds up. And I want a good 2 inches because leakage. There's always the trouble because it doesn't really have a base or sides. There's always the question of leakage with a galette. Not that it matters so much, but things get sticky if it gets syrupy and then like burnt. So I want to be sure that I can gather it up around the filling enough to prevent little cracks.
Mm-hmm. So while you're cutting, I did, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Susan did add an article to the chat about the apple cheese or the apple pie with cheese. And it does look like it was an English thing.
I
did not get a chance to fully read, but there's an article there that I'll put it on our Pie Week website to share with everyone.
Tell me, does anybody have any kind of no-goes when it comes to pie, things that you just don't like in your pie? How about sweet crust? Anybody like sweet crust?
I'm not sure what that is, honestly.
It's more like biscuity, more like a tart. Yeah, like a biscuity. Sometimes you get cheesecake has a like a sweet biscuity crust. I'm not sure I like it. I think that, a traditional American pie crust, because I guess the apple pie really is, and that crust really is American, isn't it? I like it because there's a little bit of saltiness to the crust, which is a really nice counterpoint to the, sweet, tart, spicy cinnamoniness. I mean, a beautiful crust is really a wonderful thing, especially people who can get like really big flakiness. Beth was saying that she tried a King Arthur recipe that turned out really, really flaky.
Yeah, it was the all butter King Arthur flour all butter pie crust, and it ended up that's like essentially the accidental puff pastry that I made. It had such big like puffy flakes in it, and it was really like I had a little bit of the leftovers that I just baked the leftovers with some cinnamon sugar, which was part of how I found out that it was basically like a puff pastry, and it was so delicious.
Have you tried it again?
I haven't.
I wonder if you're going to have the same good luck, or is it like the lottery, once in a million? Okay, so
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the recipe called for an insane amount of butter. I think it was 2 full sticks of butter, and I left the pieces pretty much pea size. So when I was rolling it out, it looked almost like cellulite, honestly, because like you could see hard pieces of butter all over the place. But it turned out so well, even though it was ugly in the process. Like non-homogeneous crust is the way to go.
See, we think it's wrong. Like in everything else we do, lumps is a bad thing in cooking. Mm-hmm. But I think it's the one case where like a lumpiness with the butter is really good.
Susan, I have a question. Like if you were to make a savory galette, would the same crust recipe work, or would you change it a little differently for something that was savory?
I think it would work. This is a pretty sturdy. It's pretty sturdy, so I do think it would work. In my winter cookbook, I did a savory galette, and it's a pie crust a lot like this, and it has ground hazelnuts in it, so that gives a kind of nuttiness. and a little bit of heft to the pie crust, but I think this would work. I really like savory galettes with puff pastry, I have to say. There's something about the way they puff up around the filling that's really, really nice. Like, and it just looks so substantial. They look really impressive.
Thank you.
Somebody, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, that sounds amazing. I'm like sitting, oh, sounds so good.
Yeah, we're making ourselves hungry. Okay, so here's the pears. I think it was 4 pears maybe. And I'm gonna add like just a squeeze of lemon juice, just for the same reasons I did to the apples. And I think I'm gonna make pear and chocolate today. Kind of in an inspired, so let's see, say a 1/4 cup. They're like little chocolate chunks is what they are. And brown sugar. So let me go get my brown sugar.
So while you're away, there's been a very interesting debate going on in the chat about whether cheesecake should have a crust or not. Sarah Camille thinks it should just be the cheesy filling, and Susan is incredulous, other Susan.
Yeah. I never even heard of that. The cheesecake, maybe that's New York style. Is that New York style, just cheese and a topping?
I think it must be, because I used to live in New York City, and that's where I've had it that way.
All cheese. I know that's like really hefty.
Yeah, it's sort of like souffle-ish, I guess, in a way.
So, but Sarah Camille, you said you won't eat it if there's a crust, but will you just scoop it out if there's, I mean, like you can still, there's good cheese to be had there.
Oh, yeah. I just don't eat the crust. Or sometimes I'll eat the cheese filling out, and then I'll eat the crust as a second course.
As like a cookie.
That sounds really good. Okay, so what I did while we were talking is I just added about a 1/4 cup of chocolate chips and a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and I think a little ginger would be nice in here. Yeah, ginger. Do you think ground ginger would work? What's your feeling, guys? Ginger.
I mean, I bet the ground ginger would work because it would just become part of the syrup, right?
Yeah, I mean, it won't have quite as great a oomph as I'll put half a teaspoon of ground ginger. I really think that with pear, vanilla would be really, vanilla and pear seem to me a match made in heaven. So I'm putting half a teaspoon. Okay, that's it. I'm going to stop playing with this. So raisin would be good if you wanted. I think raisins would be really nice with pear. Raisins might be nice with apple, although raisins are one of those things that people are on two sides, like whether you should put raisins in with apple. My family doesn't like, I love it, and my family doesn't like it, so I don't often have raisins in my apple crisp or my apple pie, but I think they'd be nice.
I've put dried cranberries in, and that works well, because they also, when you put dried fruit in, if you're worried about juiciness, the dried fruit will plump up and absorb some of the juice, so you don't end up with running as much. Yeah.
And the cranberries they're sweet but also tangy, so they add a really neat taste element too. Okay, because my pears are really, really juicy, I'm adding 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. Cornstarch is a really good thing to use. You could go up to 1, 2, even 3 tablespoons, like summer cherries. So they make a sauce, and they kind of they thicken the juices into a sauce, and so you don't get the trouble of soggy crust. Soggy crust is a mess. So here's my filling: chocolate, pear, vanilla, brown sugar, and I'm going to put it in the middle of my galette.
I'm really wishing that the border was open because I would just come right to your place since you've now got all of the pie opportunities.
All this pie. Okay, so you see, I left quite a generous border. Can you see? Could you see that? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And now I'm going to move the screen down a little so maybe you'll see better. So now I'm just really, it doesn't matter what I do. It's all, so I'm just bringing it up and I fold a little as I go so that to close it up. You see, kind of like a pleat. Are you able to see?
Yes, that looks really inviting.
So here's a place where, you know, maybe it was a little short, so I'm going to compensate by folding it over here. And then I fold it a little and bring it up. And now this one's going to go right up. And then I kind of, with my hands, just gently press it together. So quite a bit of the inside is still open. If I had turbinado sugar, you know, that raw, here, I'll put it back up so you can see me. You know, that raw natural sugar, that would be really nice because it would give just a little extra crunch. I don't have it now, so I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to use regular sugar. But what I want to do now to get my top crust really golden is I'm going to brush it. You could brush it with a beaten egg, or I'm just going to add a little, I'm going to use a little milk.
I love that you keep your milk in a pitcher.
Oh, that's a Canadian thing. So the milk here comes in plastic bags. You get 3 plastic bags, and this is kind of the quintessential milk pitcher. Yeah, it's funny, those things are so close to each other and some things are so different.
Susan, I used to live in Montreal. I went to McGill for graduate school, and
yes,
milk in a bag is so, it's just like, it brings me back so fast to Montreal.
Yeah, the students always get a kick out of like milk in bags.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm using a pastry brush. Mine is silicone, and I'm just going to brush the top with a little bit of milk, which will promote browning. I want it to get golden. And then I really wish I had that turbinado sugar, but I don't, because that would be really lovely. It gives this lovely crunch. But I'm just going to put my brown sugar. So just a little bit of brown sugar on top, which will give a little crunch and a little color. And now it's going to go in the oven. So I think that I'm not going to put it in the oven yet, because let me double check the recipe. I think the galette often calls for a hotter oven. Let me see. Yeah, 400 degrees, because you really want it to set. So I'm going to put this in the fridge for now. And when that other pie is out at 375, I'm going to jack up the heat and put it in. So I guess we're done. I've made a big mess of my kitchen, but I really want to thank Beth and all of you, because ta-da! I did it. I rolled out the dough. I didn't embarrass myself.
So proud of you.
Look, here it is. I'm so proud.
It's
Sorry.
beautiful and will be delicious, I have no doubt.
You guys were really great. Thank you for your support.
We would have never known you were nervous about it.
Yeah, you know, it was like group therapy. So did anybody else who made the pie kind of on the spot? How did things go?
In the oven, and it's smelling great. Yep.
Okay, let me see what's going on in here. Oh yeah, it's looking good. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, it was so nice meeting you, spending a little time with you, talking pie.
Thank you so much, Susan, for welcoming us into your kitchen and sharing your wealth of culinary knowledge, even when we put you on the spot with things like rolling out dough or asking you the apparently controversial cheese and apple pie question.
Yes.
It's always fun to be with you in this space. and maybe one of the best things to come out of the pandemic, because we would have just gone with our normal chili cook-off in the fall, and we never would have had the opportunity to join you in your kitchen. So this is really wonderful. And then for all of you joining us today, remember to check out the Pie Week events on our website. I will add Julia's galette dough to that website as well. And then all of our Pie Week events are sponsored by the Champlain College Library, the Math Department, the ITS Division, and the Smart Space. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a
Thank
nice day.
you. Bye.
Bye.